Hi, I'm Amelia and I work with those who've gone to boarding school. It's an area that I've chosen to specialise in. And therefore, over the last, well, 20 years, I guess, since I've been working in this field, but specifically the last 5 years since I've been running quite a large online course, I work every day with ex-boarders. And that has really built up a lot of my experience and understanding of some of the impacts of going to boarding school. So last week, in a conversation with my own mother, we were talking about Andrew Epstein and everything that has been very much in the press of late. So the conversation began really with us talking about the differences in our own understanding of our role as a woman, our sexuality, and how that was impacted by growing up in the different eras that we grew up in. It enabled us to have a conversation in which I really shared the impact that I feel growing up in the 80s and 90s, firstly in a boarding school, in a co-ed boarding school had for me, and the messages of huge sexualization that came through as a result of that. The magazines that were around at the time, Heat magazine, Just 17 magazine, where all the images, all the polls that were there in the time, questionnaires, how do you become more sexy? Heat magazine had this girl magazine also, and it had they would kind of put circles around parts of women's bodies if they were too fat or showed cellulite, and it was called shaming. And it was just openly accepted. This is what we did. This is what went on at the time. And there was also all the pop videos, which really started coming in around those kind of times. It was when it all really kind of opened up with MTV, and suddenly there were all these sexy young teenagers actually. And it was the younger women who were suddenly thrust into all these videos, which really influenced myself. And I'm sure many of you, if you're women who grew up in the same era as me, will have taken on those messages that our bodies are for sexual use, but for sexual use for men, for other people, not for ourselves. There was no question about what our own sexuality was or our own sexual desire. No one spoke about that or role modeled that. So very much grew up thinking this is what our bodies are for. And a lot of women my age now, there's a lot of anger about that. And that's what's been emerging in recent years. And hence what's going on in the press at the moment or more recently stirs up a lot of really strong anger for women, because this has been our norm. This has been our norm, and how we have been brought up. Whereas my mum was saying that in her age, it was very much like no sex before marriage. And it was, dances in village halls and so far over the other way. And we were just comparing the impact that that has had on both of us as women. The conversation then went to Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew. And at one point, she said to me, but why would he? Why would he go along with all this and put so much in jeopardy? And it really started me thinking and really looking at all of this through a boarding school lens. So Prince Andrew was sent away to boarding school when he was 8 years old. 8 is really, really young. A child is in desperate need for love, support, guidance, care, nurture. They don't know even what their emotions are, let alone how to name them, let alone how to regulate them. This is what you learn from parents, from caregivers who are there to be attuned to you and reflect back what you're feeling with the language that they know, but you as a child don't know. So what happens for a child when they go away to boarding school is they have to shut off any emotions they have overnight, and they have to tell themselves that they don't need their mother. They don't need physical touch. They don't need hugs. They don't need intimacy. They don't need tenderness. The risk of allowing those feelings to emerge means that you're likely to be bullied. Homesickness, you will be called wet, pathetic, crybaby. So they learn very quickly to push any of those feelings away, to disconnect from them, and to split off that part of themselves. However, that part doesn't disappear completely. It's like it gets hidden, like encased in this outer shell. So the whole time that you're at school, you can go along and you can play in the first 15 and you can be really tough. And this little part is hidden. So for some men, I may hear them say that, they may have secretly cried under their duvet at night, but desperately making sure that nobody saw them. It may be a case, I've heard from parents as well as children, that say actually when the boy went away to school, when he first came back at that exeat or at those holidays, he has this guard up because he's not going to risk opening himself up to his mum again and then having to shut down and open and shut. So you just stop it. You tell yourself you don't need your mum. However, these boys do need their mum. They really do. So what we can see, possibly looking in with respect to the whole Prince Andrew situation, is, as my mum was saying, why would he fall under the spell of someone like Jeffrey Epstein? So I was looking at this through three different factors. One, Andrew was emotionally deprived. He was desperate for love and tenderness and affection. And often what happens with children, with boys, is that they conflate sex with intimacy. So who knows what happened at those parties with regards to him, but there can be a yearning for love, a yearning for tenderness. But actually, in the dormitory at school, all that the boys hear about is sex, and that seems to be the thing that you need to go for. And often, what I see with men is that they have continual different sexual partners or sexual infidelities because they're seeking love, but they don't realize it necessarily at the time. But love gets mixed up with sex for all those different reasons. So there may be something like that going on for him. One of the second aspects I was thinking about was about this part of them that gets split off, as I said, that gets hidden, that gets shut down. And many ex-boarders, it's as if they have different parts of themselves, that some are hidden from view. And the need for privacy is incredibly important. Often at school, the only way to get any privacy is in a toilet, and even then, there may not be locks on the door. Everything is exposed. There is nowhere that is safe, nowhere that you can get away from people. So often, the only place that people can get away from other people is in their own mind. And this is the bit that often comes up in relationship because partners are saying, tell me what you're thinking. And it can produce angry feelings because it's like, no, this is my private world. I'm not going to share my thoughts. Because at school, that was the only place that you could have your own privacy. It wasn't like growing up at home where you had a bedroom and you could just shut the door. Um, so what often happens, and I often hear for people, and they have very separate lives. So they may have their work self and their home self, but they may also be people that can compartmentalize so much that they can have affairs. They could even have different families and different, like in different countries. And when they're in that place, they're literally disconnected, and it's as if their other life doesn't exist. So there may be a situation where Andrew was out there in America or doing what he's doing with Jeffrey Epstein and completely detached from his life on British soil. It's as if it doesn't exist. And that is also one of the ways that children manage to cope. They split part of themselves off. They detach from their identity within a family unit and just become that child at school. And the third way that I can see this is the importance of the relationships with their peers. So when your attachments from home are broken, which as I've just explained has to happen in order to be able to function at boarding school, because if you spend your time crying because you miss your brother or your sister or your mum or your guinea pig, then you're going to be ostracized by the other boys in your boarding house. You're going to be picked on, you're going to be bullied, and even worse, kind of really violently attacked as a result of showing any of those characteristics. So detachment happens from your family, and for those who survive or thrive at boarding school, they need to attach to their peer group. So that becomes the most important thing ever. It's a survival mechanism. So people adapt their character. So therefore, they do whatever is needed to become one of the boys, to attach to those people. It might mean changing your accent, taking up a sport that you wouldn't normally play, really finding your way to attach to those people and to feel accepted. And what I really want to emphasize here is this isn't a choice. It's often a trauma response. It is necessary and it feels like your survival depends on it. So, therefore, that adaptation, or we may look at it like people pleasing characteristics, they come from a need where within your system it feels like you won't survive without it. So how we could use this in the Andrew Epstein experience is thinking, well, what was it? Why was it that he was so under his influence? What enabled him? Why did he not step back and think, what am I doing? This guy is not someone that I need to be close to. And it's as if all rational thought wasn't there at that moment. And this is what can happen. If someone has complex PTSD, which often results as a result of a lot of emotional neglect and feeling unsafe, it can become that there is no place for this prefrontal cortex, for the rational to come in, to think clearly. It's just a trauma response which attaches you to this person. And it doesn't mean that that person is the right person for you to attach yourself to or the safe person, but it's actually a chemical reaction in your body which causes that to happen. So these are just some of my thoughts. So I'm not saying that there's truth or that this is a reason why, or that in any way, shape, or form this excuses any of the behavior that has occurred. But it's just trying to understand through more of the kind of boarding school syndrome psychological lens as to what may be underneath some of the reasons why someone such as Andrew may respond in such a way when we just can't comprehend it using, I guess, our own experience or our own understanding of having a very different upbringing to what he's had. So let me know if you agree with any of this, if you don't agree with any of this. Yeah, they're just my thoughts. So let me know what you think. All right, take care.